Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have some good strategies to cover tonight, so we want to make sure we have time for those and for the individual conversations that you will be able to have in your groups. So thank you again for joining us. And in a couple of slides, we're actually going to ask people to let us know in the chat where you're coming from, just so we can get a sense of of who is here with us this evening. I do want to make sure to thank our presenters tonight. So Rebecca Sherrod will be presenting. Grant Allen will be presenting, and David Royer will also be presenting and wrapping us up tonight. So we're super excited for the team we have here to support you. As well, we have multiple coaches who will be in your breakout rooms and just helping engage in conversation with you as you're talking about tonight's topic, which is practical strategies to maximize engagement and limit disruption. And that is really the goal, is what are the quick tools that we can put in the hands of teachers so that they can help kids stay engaged with the academic instruction that's happening in the classroom, and also minimize those disruptions that often take away from that instructional time, which we know is so important. All right. Yeah. So whenever we present any of our work, of course, we're going to contextualize this within a comprehensive integrated three-tiered model of prevention, CI3T, lovingly known. And we just want to make sure that we're always situating this within the model so that you understand where the content for tonight can be placed in terms of thinking about your professional learning and the professional learning that you're going to bring back to the schools that you work with, the educators that you work with in various capacities. As we know, low intensity strategies are really a focus on tier 1. We want all students to have benefit from these strategies. They're very easy to use with regular everyday instruction across content areas. They can also be used more intentionally at tier 2 and tier 3, and we'll talk about that very briefly. All right, if you are connected on social media, we would love for you to connect with us. And our own dear Dr. Common really leads this effort for us. So Eric, is there anything you want to say about our Twitter accounts, or it's not even called Twitter anymore? X?
No.
Formerly known as Twitter.
We are active on Instagram, and we have an X account, and we hear LinkedIn's the new place to go. So
It is. I
wait
agree.
patiently, we'll be there.
Okay. Thanks for that, Eric. Okay, and just to situate us within this year, we're just entering that holiday season. It's hard to believe that half of this school year is already passing us by, but we are right there with Project Empower Session 3. That's where we are tonight. And we do have one more CI3T trainers and coaches call in December. So if you are interested in that, please, and you need that information, please put your name in the chat, and we'll make sure that we share that link out with where you can register. That's just a drop in. Come talk to others who are doing this work from around the country, ask questions, get a little bit of content. So it's really just a collaborative space, and we would love to have you join us as you're able and interested. We do have 3 more Project Empower sessions next year. So starting in January, then another one in March, and we'll wrap up the year in April, right as the year's coming to a conclusion. Those are available on our website for you to be able to register for any and all of those as you would like. All right, and this is where they are. So if you go to ci3t.org, and maybe Eric will put that in the chat for us, and then you click on the Professional Learning tab at the top, you will see Project Empower and a quick link, or you can just scroll down and see this graphics that is on the right-hand side of your screen. If you click on the piece that looks like a paper, that is where you will see all the links, the descriptions, and you'll be able to register as you did for tonight, unless somebody else did that for you. And then what you'll see in that drop-down is all of the materials that we use tonight will be available there, in addition to the recording of this session in sections. And thank you to David and your team for doing that, so that they're available for you to use as you would like with the people that you work with and support, or for yourself if you just want a refresher or a reminder. So we invite you to visit that, all open access for everyone to use. All right, a long welcome, but So here is our agenda for this evening. We're actually going to introduce and talk about 3 of the low intensity strategies: pre-correction, active supervision, and opportunities to respond. And then we are just going to make sure that we are constantly contextualizing this in a tiered model for your use. All right, so welcome again. We're so glad you're here. The CI3T journey has come a long way over many years, starting in 1997, and you can see where it has been moved across time. If you're here from Kentucky, and David Royer is your Kentucky contact there, he started the work in Hawaii as well, so you'll see that down there. Some of you are involved in what's called Project Enhance, and that is the work that we've been doing with CI3T over the last several years in order to learn more about the needs of the communities that we serve. And so if you look on the left-hand side of this in that first row that says design, we spent the first year of this project really learning and listening and talking with educators around the country to find out what they needed in terms of support for leadership, building capacity to support students maybe with challenging behaviors or with learning and behavioral difficulties, and also around screening. And then we spent a couple of years with design work, which we are still iterating on as we're continuing to learn from you. And now we are in this last phase where we're actually testing in a randomized control trial educators and schools who are using our traditional approach to CI3T implementation support, and those who are using the enhanced support. Tonight is the traditional series for this project. However, we're really excited to share that in June, all of the materials will be available for use widely. So anyone will be able to access those. So please keep an eye on the website as those become available in June. All right, let's jump in. Low intensity strategies. So what we know is at tier 1, we use low intensity strategies to create that proactive, positive environment for our students where we are knowing them and the context and anticipating challenges before they even arise. So we're thinking about our academic instruction and what skills students might need to be effective or, to successfully participate in those activities. So how can we support them through these behavioral strategies that both get in front of any problem behaviors and then engage students in really active learning so that they, that any behavioral problems can be minimized. We know that these strategies are useful and effective for all students in our classroom. And so we really want them to be part of every tier 1 practice, every tier 1 plan that schools have. These are outlined in your CI3T implementation manual. So all of the schools that we work with have a section under the responsibilities, behavioral and or academic, for teachers to use and implement these strategies in their classroom. We promote them because they have such good impact for kids and because they're not overtaxing for teachers. So they take really a limited amount of planning. Some of them take a little more than others, and David will talk to you a little bit about opportunities to respond tonight. But also they are things that you can naturally bring into your daily instruction. You will see them recorded in your plan, as I said, under the academic component, because they do support students in engaging in academic instruction. They're also a behavioral sport, so they really cross that line. And when we talk about CI3T being integrated, that's really what we're talking about. It's benefit in both spaces. These are the low intensity strategies. We actually wrote this book several years ago, and it was based on feedback from educators in the field who wanted to know more of how to do these in the classroom. So we talk about them, and we talked about, how useful they could be, but they were like, we need step-by-step checklists. We need tools. We need, all of the resources to implement these strategies. And so we wrote this book in order to respond to that ask from the field. The good news is that all of these materials are available on the website, so you can download and use them for free, and they're all editable. We also want to make sure that when we think about supporting students' behavior, that we want to heavily lean on prevention and taking an instructional approach to academics and behavior and social emotional learning. But we do have plans, and we always make sure that there's a plan for responding when things do not go as we hope they will. We want to make sure that we do that in a systematic approach that is used consistently across everyone in the building. All right, and then we're also bringing in that social skill instruction. That's so important, certainly now for all of our students, to be intentional about that. So this plan really includes those procedures for teaching, procedures for reinforcing, because we really want to make sure that we are not ever making assumptions about the behaviors that students should be doing, but teaching those behaviors just like we would any other content area in our classrooms, and then making sure that we give students opportunities for practice and provide reinforcement. And by reinforcement, what I mean is our feedback to make sure that they know when they've met the expectation and when they've partially met the expectation so they can continue to grow. So really it's about acknowledging. And then we're going to monitor to make sure that we know whether these strategies are working as we expect them to do. One of the tools that we have available for use is the the integrated lesson plan. And the integrated lesson plan is really just a prompt. It's not that we're recommending these particular categories, but it's really just a prompt to say, what am I teaching academically? What are my objectives for the behavioral considerations that are going to help students be successful in that activity? And what are the social and emotional skills that we're teaching and learning in class that would help students in a place where they can practice them in an authentic context and receive feedback? We also think about using the low intensity strategies at the same time so that we are getting in front of those behaviors. We're letting kids know what we expect from them so that they can meet the expectation, as opposed to the opposite, which would be waiting until a problem arises and then trying to correct it after the fact. And again, these are available on the website. These are three key features that every plan has, and every one of the presenters will touch on these a little bit in their presentation, but we want to make sure that we are checking social validity. So what do the stakeholders that are implementing these practices think about them? How is it working for them? And how might we need to adjust to make it a better fit? We also want to think about treatment integrity, which means, are you implementing what the plan is as it was designed? Because we can't really assess student outcomes until we know that there's been benefit from having the plan in place. And then systematic screening is the proactive way, both academically and behaviorally, that we check every single student in our building to know who might need more instead of waiting for those concerns to arise. All right, at tier 2, we can use our low intensity strategies more intentionally for specific students. So this intervention grid shows you the name of the support in the first column. The second one is the description of that support. Then you're going to look at what are the school-wide data, your systematic screening data certainly being important to that. It might be attendance data, other kinds of information that you collect on all students to make a determination for who that might be most important for. We want to collect information for monitoring how students are responding to that practice that we're using, and then make sure we have a plan for transitioning away from that more intentional support back to that tier 1 practice for everyone's use. So these strategies can all be used in very targeted ways for specific students. And then the third element is at tier 3. At tier 3, we're using individualized approaches. So the low intensity strategies may be part of a multi-component intervention or a larger, more individualized kind of package for students. All right, let's talk about building our library. So when we think about building our library, we're building the tools that we know we can go to immediately. If you just start to Google some of these things, you're going to get a million different hits. Some of them will be high quality evidence-based and others of them might not be. And so as you're picking and choosing the things that you want to bring into your school, we would suggest that you create the library for doing that. And we'll dig a little bit deeper around the teacher delivered strategies, which are those low intensity ones. Okay, here they are again in your plan, up and down. Okay, so here are each of the strategies that we have materials to support you with on the website. Again, they're available free to you. And we would recommend that you just download the entire package and you can put them on your shared drive. You can edit them as you like. You can brand them for your school. And they're just all customizable for your use. When you're thinking about which of them to start with, because that was quite a few of them, and you don't want to do them all at one time, what you're looking at are your school-wide data. And for this one, we're looking across both our academic for reading and math of Ames Web. We're looking across behavioral data for externalizing and internalizing, office discipline referrals, and also days absent, thinking about the strategy that we might want to start with and whether we should start with tier 1 or be more intentional for tier 2. So if you would in the chat, put down your recommendation for whether this class or this school with this class in it should start with tier 1, increasing the use of low intensity strategies at tier 1 for all kids, or more intentionally for some specific kids with higher needs. So where would you start? Okay. And if you're bringing them in, you could honestly do both, right? You could bring it in as a tier 1 practice, making sure you're bringing in for all students, given the number that you have, and being really intentional around support for the few students who are showing higher levels of need. But the idea is that you're using your data to drive the strategy that you would like to start with. All right. Again, this is where you will find them. And this just shows you a highlight of what the website will look like. So if you go to ci3t.com or .org, you go to the professional learning tab, and then you scroll down to the tiered intervention library. I'm so sorry. I don't know if you can see that pop up. All of these strategies have the following materials that are there. So there's a PowerPoint presentation, grids, checklists for you to use, social validity forms, as we were talking about, to get the perspectives of the adults, both family members and teachers who you might be supporting, and also the student, as well as some implementation materials. We also have some additional supports. Some of these are video-based. This little one in the front with a heart is a video. You can send those home to families if you would like to share the strategy that you're teaching with the students at school. There's also some quick infographics that have been made, and they are across the different strategies. There are some to support parents at home. There are actually some that are available also in Spanish as well. And then if you go to the literature page, it just gives you some of the resources and this special issue of articles that just show examples that you can also use for your own reading and also for your professional learning. Okay, and then this brings us back to the integrated lesson plan, just to keep that in front of you. When we're thinking about—
Can I interrupt? And can you go back to that last slide? I just wanted to highlight that special issue in preventing school failure. All of those articles are open access. So I went ahead and I dropped that link in the chat box. We'll be talking about some of those strategies today.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, so open access means there's no paywall, there's no university login that you have to do. You can just access them through that link. Thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate it. All right. Now, the idea on this is, as you're building your library and thinking about bringing this information into your school, we would recommend that you build your own leadership within your school. So what we've learned, and as I showed you that graphic of Project Enhance over a couple of years, what we learned is that educators really want to learn with their colleagues. They like to do it during the school day and often in their school building, which is probably no surprise to most of you here. So one of the things that you can do, or that we recommend, and we recommend it because we've seen schools do it really effectively, is think about what the strategy is that you want to introduce, kind of map out the plan that you want, and then think about who are the people who might be the on-site experts who will learn more deeply about the strategy and then bring that learning back to your school so that you can be building the capacity within your school. You can use the materials, the treatment integrity form, as coaching feedback tools. I like to laminate them and just hang them up on the board. So if somebody comes in my room and they know I'm working on a strategy, they can pull that checklist down. They can give me some quick feedback. They can leave it up on there and then on my board, and then they can walk away. And then I've gotten some really good peer feedback on how I'm trying to bring this new practice into my daily routine. This is a way so that everyone becomes a teacher and a learner, so that we don't have one set of people who are presenting to everybody, but really everybody is contributing in different ways to learn new skills and also to support teachers in using them in the classroom. All right. So these are the three that we're going to do tonight. We're going to start with pre-correction next. We're going to hand it over to Grant for active supervision, and then finish up with David and opportunities to respond. So I'm going to switch screen share with Rebecca Sherrod. You're up.
All right, the first strategy we're going to talk about is pre-correction. And you've seen a lot of these resources already tonight when you showed us where to find them. We're going to continue to put them in front of you throughout the evening. And if you're having trouble locating them, drop us a note in the chat, or when we get into breakout rooms, you'll be able to ask somebody in there. And for the low intensity strategies that we're going to be talking tonight, Wendy highlighted on the website where you can access these materials for these different strategies. Can you all see the CI3T website? Okay. So the presentation that we're actually going to use for these strategies is the one that's available on the website. So if you go to ci3t.org and then to the professional learning tab, you'll scroll on down like Wendy showed us to those blue accordion bars, and we're going to start with pre-correction. So you expand that, and this is the PowerPoint presentation that I'll download and then open up. Let's see how seamlessly I can do it. Can you see that? Cool. Okay. So pre-correction is where we're going to start. It's a low intensity strategy. Wendy did a great job of setting the stage with CI3T. So we'll continue to do that with each of these strategies. It can work at tier 1. It's good for all kids. And it can also be a standalone tier 2 intervention. It can also be part of a tier 2 or a tier 3 intervention, kind of embedded within those. Yes, tier 2 or tier 3. And so as we think about kind of this continuum of supports, right, you have CI3T, this tiered model, maybe PBIS, that moves on to these low intensity strategies. And then you can kind of get more intensive with things like self-monitoring or functional assessment-based interventions, right, things to assess, design, and implement and evaluate how students are doing. And these low intensity strategies can be an important part of that, right? There's a plethora of different strategies that you can use to support in your classroom. So today, when we're talking about pre-correction, we're going to talk about what it is, why it's effective, what some research says, kind of the benefits and the challenges of using it, and then we'll go through the steps and talk a little bit about how you can implement it in your classroom. A check for success. So pre-correction is an antecedent-based intervention. And so when we think about what that means, it really means that it's something that occurs before a behavior happens. So one of the best things about pre-correction is that it is really, really proactive, because you're not waiting for problematic behavior. You're intervening before, right? You're setting the stage right from the get-go. So it's an antecedent, and that just means it's coming before a behavior happens. And so with pre-correction, you're getting ahead of problematic behavior, and you kind of shift your thinking from this waiting for problems to occur, kind of challenges, I don't know, arising everywhere, to kind of setting up kids to be successful, right? Letting them know what the expectations are and then reinforcing them when they are meeting those expectations. So the steps we'll talk about tonight are built off of steps from other researchers. So these are 7 steps, but we'll actually talk about an 8th one this afternoon. So some examples of pre-correction: you start by identifying kind of expected behaviors that you would want to see. So if you're in a school that's implementing CI3T or implementing PBIS, you have these expectation matrices where all of those expectations are already lined out. So that's what you can use when you're thinking about, what am I going to remind my students are the expectations, or what am I going to let them know that I'm looking for? You don't have to guess what those are. They're already outlined. So you can use the things in place at your school. And if you're working at a school that's implementing CI3T, these expectation matrices. But if you're working at a school that's implementing CI3T, these expectations are developed based on input from all faculty and staff in the building, which is kind of cool. So you know that those expectations are things that people in the building care about and they want to see more of. So you can think about saying things like, as we head to lunch, who can tell me what it looks like to be respectful in the cafeteria? That can be a great pre-correction, and you can use things that are already in place in your school, and it's not limited to just your classroom. It can be the cafeteria, the hallway, right? Anywhere those expectations are, you can pre-correct students. So some examples of that might be when you're walking to PE, asking kids to tell you what's one way they can show respect in the hallways, right? It ties in with your expectations. And you're letting them know that that's what you want to see before you even get there. And then, as we're lining up for lunch, can you tell me one way that you're going to be responsible in the cafeteria? So again, just tying it back to those expectation matrices. So when we think about why pre-correction is effective, it's really proactive. So you're identifying where challenges might occur, and then you're letting students know what they should do before they even get into that situation. So it really gets in front of behavior that could potentially escalate into kind of negative or spiraling patterns. So you're getting out in front of that. If you're implementing CI3T, again, it fits in really seamlessly with those expectations, and you already have a plan in place for reinforcing students. So one of the steps that we'll talk about is when students meet those expectations after you pre-correct, reinforcing them. And that system will be something that's already developed. And then it fits right in with the idea of clearly teaching expectations, right? And you're using it across the tiers to support students. So when we think about the supporting research for pre-correction, there have been quite a few studies that have shown it is a very feasible and effective tool. In addition to the ones that you can see on the screen, there was a pretty recently done literature review that goes over a lot of the studies around pre-correction, and it was actually established as an evidence-based intervention strategy. So that's really cool. And if you are a nerd like us, we have this research document that was in that blue accordion bar that we looked at earlier. If you're interested in reading a little bit more about what the research says or about some of the studies that have been conducted around pre-correction. So when you think about kind of the benefits and the challenges, again, you are kind of resetting or restructuring that environment to be really proactive when challenges occur. And pre-correction is really flexible. So it can be used across all grade spans. When we were looking at that research exists across all grade levels, from early childhood all the way to high school, in multiple different settings. So there's a lot of flexibility. It can take a little bit of time, right, to shift to that perspective. If you get kind of really used to just constantly responding, it can be a little bit hard to pause and reset as you start to adopt this strategy. And you have to be relatively familiar with the setting that you're going to be pre-correcting for, because you wouldn't want to say, you don't want to pre-correct students to do something that wouldn't be acceptable in a certain situation. Okay, so we're going to go through the steps just briefly to implementing pre-correction. And if you're interested in chatting about it a little bit more, we'll have time in the upcoming breakout room. So when you're first starting to implement pre-correction, step one is to identify contexts and anticipated behaviors. So you want to know where problem behavior might be occurring so that, again, we can intervene ahead of time. So after you identify what the context might be or the area might be, you'll move on to step two, which is determine the expected behaviors. So you got to know what you're going to tell students to do. And then in step three, you're adjusting the environment. So you're looking to see, are there physical changes I need to make to the environment? Do I need to maybe hang up a poster as a prompt for myself? If students maybe can't read, or for students themselves that I can point to and encourage them to look at, right? Like, what adjustments can you make so that if you're pre-correcting students to line up at the door to the classroom, is there actually space to line up at the door, right? Think about those environment adjustments. And then step four, oh, you know what? These have little check marks that I forgot about. Step four is provide opportunities for behavioral rehearsal. So you never want to assume that students know how to do something, right? Because sometimes even the simplest things where we're like, we know that they got this one, sometimes kids surprise us, right? So just provide them explicit instructions and opportunities to practice whatever that behavior is, so that they get a chance to actually try it. And then with step five, you are providing strong and immediate reinforcement for students when they're engaging in that expected behavior, because we want them to receive that reinforcement right away, so that we're increasing the chances that that behavior is going to happen again. So when they're practicing and when they're doing it on their own, you're providing reinforcement. And especially when you're first starting this, you can really go strong with that reinforcement, right? You really want them to access that so that they start doing it and they start accessing maybe naturally occurring reinforcement in the environment. And then with step six, you want to have some type of prompting plan so that you can remind students about what the expected behavior is as you're going through different areas of the day. And one thing to consider about this is also prompts that you might need as the instructor or the educator to remind yourself, to remind your students, right? And so maybe that is the expectation matrix hung somewhere in your classroom, or, you know, on a lanyard around your neck, things like that. But what prompts are going to be in place to support students with using this? And then with any strategy or intervention, you want some plan to monitor to see if what you're putting into place is effective. So that's step 7. You want some type of plan to think about, is what I'm doing, A, am I actually doing it? And B, is it working? And then with step 8, you want to offer students the opportunity to give feedback on this strategy to see, do they like it? Is there something that maybe if it was tweaked, they would like it a little bit more? Is there something that when it happens, they're really just kind of gritting their teeth and they hate it, right? Which would not be what we want, right? So you can get some input from students to make sure that they're feeling good about the use of this strategy. And so with those 8 strategies, we have some resources that are available to help support you in using this in your classroom, or if you're sharing this strategy with others, there are some resources that you can share. All are on that website. So the first is this like step-by-step implementation checklist for pre-correction that walks you through each one of those steps we just did. And then Wendy gave us a nice plug for talking about treatment integrity and social validity. So we don't want to say that something isn't working if we don't know that it's actually taking place. So when you're adopting this strategy, you can think about treatment integrity, and there's another resource you can download on the website where you can actually track your implementation of this intervention to see, am I implementing this with fidelity? And then the other thing on that sheet was social validity, which is how people feel about the goals, the procedures, and the outcomes of an intervention. And so you want to get student social validity, right? That's step 8 of pre-correction, and there are forms where you can track pre and post, maybe if you're using this intentionally with students to see how they're feeling. You can also look for teacher social validity to see, are the adults that are implementing this intervention, how do they feel? How do they feel about it, pre and post? And then again, you can intensify the use of pre-correction to be a tier 2 intervention. And so there are these intervention grids. If you're implementing CI3T in your implementation manual, you'll have a list of these grids, and a lot of them might be these low intensity strategies, and it outlines what it looks like to use pre-correction at a tier 2 strategy, what data from a school might you use to see who's eligible for that intervention, and then how you're going to monitor progress and when you'll know it's time to exit the intervention. And that exists for elementary schools, and there's also an example of middle school. So you can use it kind of across the continuum again. So as you're thinking about this strategy and maybe others, it's important that you take time to plan out how you're going to use it. So we're almost to our talk time. This is the talk time that's in the presentation on the website. So if you were delivering this, you might say, you might take this opportunity to pause so people can intentionally plan out what that looks like. And then you can come back together to say, how are we going to continue our professional learning around these topics to support the kids in our school and the adults in our school as well. So again, that book that's been mentioned a couple times, the toolkit book that goes over each one of those resources, those low intensity strategies might be a great place to start. In addition to some of those other journals and books that you can use to build your toolkit. So that is the last slide on this presentation.
So the second strategy that we'll be talking about today is active supervision. And as you will learn in just a moment, it's more than just sort of looking around a lot. So if you want to learn a bit more about this strategy, you can go to our website, just as Rebecca did, on that same CI3T page, same CI3T channel. You can pop open the accordion under the professional learning page. It says active supervision, as noted by the expertly placed graphics on the PowerPoint. And you can click the PowerPoint presentation, which is what I'm going to do right this moment. Okay, y'all can still see the screen, okay, good. All right, so let's go over to professional learning. And we'll just scroll on down past a few things. Past that. Ooh, the trainers and coaches calls. Oh, that's interesting. We'll just keep going down past that. And there's active supervision. And we can click on that PowerPoint right there. And it's going to do something like that. And then I'm going to go and pull up my PowerPoint over here. Move a few windows. And then we're going to present it. Okay. How's that look? All right, I'm seeing it. Thank you so much. So this is the presentation on active supervision. Now, you're going to be getting about 10-ish minutes of me talking through this. I have used this presentation and others like it in about an hour-long professional learning activity. So this is something you can definitely kind of go deeper on if you're interested in sharing this information with other professionals. So just kind of an FYI, I'm going to give you a little bit of a clipped version as we talk through this. So, and the benefit of these resources that you're going to see some parallelism between some of the resources that we've got. So if you've looked at one of them, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what you can expect in other types of presentations here. So here's just a brief agenda of what this PowerPoint presentation is all about. So active supervision, this strategy, again, another low intensity strategy, it's defined as using specific and overt behaviors, things like scanning, escorting, kind of moving around with students, interacting with students, designed to prevent problem behavior and promote rule following behavior. So this is from the Colvin and Friends, 1997. So this is kind of when the first sort of paper looking at this strategy sort of came out. It is really effective when used with pre-corrections. So you can combine those two strategies to make it even more impactful. And indeed, a lot of the research that we'll talk about in just a bit has used sort of a package intervention in that way. There's a few elements that are quite distinctive in active supervision, things like establishing expectations. Yeah, a bit of proximity control in a way. Frequent scanning of the context, using positive interactions, reinforcing of desired behaviors, and when necessary, correction in a private business-like way to help success. We have a nice little document that kind of introduces what active supervision is, a nice little narrative form. So you can check that out on the website as well. So why is this strategy of active supervision, why is this effective? Well, for a few reasons. It provides a more efficient problem solving sort of response to challenges when they occur, rather than sort of relying on reactive types of things. It helps to be kind of proactive and try to reduce things before they occur, or mitigate the likelihood that challenging behaviors will increase in intensity. It helps to kind of provide sort of routines and structures for students to have predictable learning environments. And, we're trying to take a systematic approach to supporting behaviors while, making sure that we're prompting and promoting those pro-social behaviors that we're looking to see. Things that you might see within a PBIS model, the 3 to 5 school-wide expectations, we can very strongly reinforce those within, our CI3T framework, for example. So some research, this has been researched in a number of different places and in a number of different contexts. I think the 97 article looked at transitions between like students coming to school, students going to recess or lunch, and students leaving school. So using active supervision was really useful in helping to promote more safe behaviors. You can use it in classrooms. You can use it like during hallways, during like a passing time in high schools. This is what I think the Tire study was about, or maybe it was the Hayden one. But it's across the grade span. It's useful. It's across different contexts. It's really beneficial. Anytime that the students are kind of moving or acting in a sort of somewhat independent fashion, you can move forward and kind of move within folks to be interactive and support them. And we've got some information on that here if you are interested in kind of learning more about the research aspect of active supervision. Some benefits. It helps to reduce problem behavior in a variety of contexts. It's been demonstrated to help improve time spent on task, which is really useful. We can look at specific behaviors too, like if we want to look at, maybe student safety, or if we want to look at, reducing off-task behavior in a classroom, we can use active supervision for this. It's really beneficial for being part of, a school safety plan that we're going to ensure that we're using active supervision in multiple contexts to ensure that we are out and about with students and try to reduce the likelihood of unsafe or undesirable behaviors, and again, proactive. As we were discussing in our previous breakout room, anytime you can prevent a behavior from occurring through your actions is going to help make a better learning environment, because you don't want to be just sort of reacting and punishing all the time. That doesn't really feel good. But, it's not something that doesn't have its challenges. So you have to think about some things carefully when looking at the strategy. It can be difficult to consistently perform, active supervision, making sure they're sort of moving about, that you're getting all the steps down. It does require some ability to kind of monitor student behavior. When I talk about this with my undergrads, we talk about the idea of sort of with itness, the idea that you present yourself in such a way to give the impression that you know what's going on at all times. Because you do, you're teachers. But that's a skill that takes place over time. You have to build that up, and soon you're going to get the reputation of, oh, that's that Mr. Allen. He's got eyes in the back of his head. And you're like, no, but he's bald. But you get, but you get there, and, with itness. So you have to have some level of ability to monitor student activity effectively. It does require some familiarity and some fluency with how to use reinforcement effectively, how to use correction in a way that is that's going to be beneficial for students. So all that stuff is going to be skills that are required in using this strategy. Now, unlike Rebecca, my presentation doesn't have fancy little check marks, so I'm just going to have to, you're going to have to kind of imagine that for yourself. So if you want to implement the strategy in your classroom, there's a few steps you're going to want to do. First thing, identify the activity or transition period that's going to be the most beneficial for active supervision. Maybe it's independent math work time, for example. Maybe that might be a situation like, I really want to kind of hone in on that. Then you want to make sure that whatever routine that you want in place is actually in place. So you might kind of think about how that's set up. And if it's not, go ahead and take some time to teach that and make sure that it's in place. When you're ready, provide the cue to begin the independent activity or whatever it is that they need to do. And as the activity unfolds, as they're working on, say, independent math work, you are scanning and monitoring the instructional environment. And as you do that, you're going to sort of move about, make sure that you are signaling your awareness of students' actions through using proximity, so being close to students, not like kind of overbearing and threatening, but just sort of move around, make sure that you're in all the places the students are. Prompting student behavior, using nonverbal communication. You might give a few, maybe some of that, or of course use verbal praise as well. When there are infractions that happen, manage those in a efficient, private, business-like way. So anytime that there's I like to say praise in public, and correct in private. It's sort of just a general rule of thumb, because you don't want to publicly embarrass a kid, because nobody wants that. I'm sure we can all think of times that's happened to us in school, and it's never good. So we want to make sure that we're reacting respectfully and effectively when when those infractions occur, and kind of make sure that you are continuing to reinforce and communicate with students kind of consistently throughout the time. And reinforce behaviors once the activity is completed. You might start off by establishing those expectations, and once the activity is done, reinforcing what happens. I really liked the way everybody was maintaining their attention during the independent work time. I saw folks that were working really hard. I noticed that. Thank you so much. And again, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, we want to give students an opportunity to share their thoughts on the practices and strategies that we do for kids. We do want to give them a voice as best we can to say, hey, this is something that was really worked for me, or maybe I found it embarrassing to have X, Y, or Z. So we want to give students that opportunity to share that feedback. And again, there's also a checklist available on the website. If you want to make sure that this is implemented, you want to make sure to check the checklist, make sure that we're good to go. Similarly, we're looking at things like treatment integrity. Did this thing happen the way it did? The reason why I think that treatment integrity is so important is that when we're looking at things like evidence-based practices, things that we have a good belief that they will be effective for our kids, one thing we have to think about is, am I doing that thing the way that the researchers did that thing to get the results that they wanted? And so one way to do that is to take information about treatment integrity. Say, okay, did I do step X, Y, Z, A, B, C? Okay, then hopefully I should see some results from the work that I'm doing. It's just a way to make sure that things are in place. And it's a way that if things aren't working, then you have an opportunity to say, well, I did this thing faithfully, but it just didn't work. So maybe I'll try something else. Again, social validity forms are impactful here as well. And we can use these with students and adults to make sure that we're getting feedback from stakeholders. And we can use active supervision as a tier 2 support as well at middle or high school, depending on the needs of students, if that is something that might be useful in a given situation, maybe as part of a package of interventions for a kid. Either way is acceptable. So that is basically the end of that.
So now we're going to transition into our third strategy for the evening, opportunities to respond. And just like Rebecca and Grant modeled for you, we're going to go to ci3t.org, and on the professional learning tab, find the bluish accordion for opportunities to respond. And I'm going to download the PowerPoint there and just use that to present, just like you can, to show you that you can take the same PowerPoint and present it with your faculty and staff. So on the professional learning tab, ci3t.org, a lot of other great stuff here you might take a look at later. Opportunities to respond, other great resources and things that we talk about in each PowerPoint slide. So there it's downloading, and I'll open that up here. Not that one. Here we go. So each of these PowerPoints for all of these strategies, the ones we're covering tonight, as well as the others on that page, follow the same predictable pattern so that you can pick up any of these PowerPoints and be ready to go, maybe with a little quick practice and review. But it's the same predictable structure where it introduces that this is part of a low intensity strategy set. And if you want to learn more, you can get this book with the toolkit on it, Supporting Behavior for School Success, Step-by-Step Guide to Key Strategies, where each chapter is one of the 7 low intensity strategies on the left. And we're going to look at opportunities to respond in this one. The Brown book's also featured because it has some other low intensity strategies, or even medium intensity strategies as well, and some just basic classroom management. And we've done book studies with schools who use that, and even the veteran teachers say this was a great reminder, things that I had forgotten, or reminding me of what I'm already doing but can do with a little more intentionality. So consider books like those for book studies with your faculty and staff. Same agenda, we'll cover what it is, why it's effective, a little bit of research, benefits, challenges, and a checklist to do it in my classroom. So in this type of opportunities to respond, this presentation is going to cover using high rates of opportunities to respond in a set time period, usually really short, like we're talking 10 minutes, where I want to have a very high rate, maybe 3 per minute, of opportunities to respond that I'm presenting to my students in the form of questions or things that I want them to do to be engaged with active participation in whatever it is we're doing. So this could be a great opportunity to review material that we've just covered, things that they've learned. Maybe they learned it a couple of days ago or last week, and we're going to review. We're just going to increase our automaticity with this material. We're going to increase our fluency with this material, commit it to memory, memorize things. And because it's such a high rate, those 3 per minute for a short period of time, there's very little opportunities for students to be off task. They are engaged with the materials because you are throwing out questions 3 per minute about, and they have no choice really but to participate. And it's usually done in a fun way and in a different way than rest of, lecture material or time. So they get really into it. With this, in that short time period, the teacher gets tons of formative feedback. I know, how are my students doing based on how they're responding and what they're saying, or I can quickly assess my whole class on each question with a quick scan to know how they did. We're going to look at the different examples in just a moment. And we just reminded that we do want to use this for materials that have already been taught. This short time period, high rate of OTR is for materials they already know. This would not be for brand new materials to be taught. So they need to already know it first. Now, we can do this in different ways. We can drop in individual questions, but the best way for me is with the unison, the choral responding. The more opportunities that I can give for the whole class to be engaged, that's 100% of students doing the activity, doing the work, engaging with me. And that's what I want. So as I continue, keep in mind that this is that short time period, 10 minutes with a high rate of opportunities to respond. But I also want you to be thinking, how can I generalize this to my whole day of teaching? I can use these opportunities to respond at a lower rate just as part of my regular teaching at tier 1 all the time. I can always be throwing out chances for choral responding and think, pair, shares in ways that I'm getting all students to engage as much as possible. I can do this verbally or non-verbally. So with verbal, we often think of choral response. I ask a question to the class. I may even tell them the answer, and I give some signal that we've practiced and worked on that they know, oh, this is our opportunity to respond as a whole class. So I might ask something like, what's the webpage for all these great low intensity strategies? It's at ci3t.org/pl. What is it? And give a signal. And then everybody here would say ci3t.org/pl. And that would be a choral response. And we practice that so there wouldn't be like a surprise when what am I supposed to do? But the same signal, the teacher gets, the students get used to it, and they know whether it's going to be a whole class response or an individual response. Or one of my favorites there is the think, pair, share, where you give them a moment to think about it, and then they turn to the neighbor or an elbow partner and they share. And that could be telling them, what is the next step? What is the first thing we're going to do in our assignment here? Or repeat what I just said to your neighbor, or summarize what we just learned with your partner. In any way that you're getting that 50% of the class, because you're partnering up, is active at the time. So 50% is talking, presenting to the neighbor, and then they can switch. And you can even give them a time limit. So you're pre-correcting to say, take 30 seconds and tell your neighbor what it is we're going to be doing for the rest of this lesson or something like that. So that way they know they're going to have to come right back to you. It's not a long think, pair, share where they're getting off task and talking about things that they're not supposed to be talking about. The nonverbal responding is great too. It can be done so quick. A lot of people are very familiar, of course, with thumbs up and thumbs down. So that can represent yes, no, true, false, or any two options that you're talking about. Or you can, of course, introduce the middle option or unknown, and you can even engage people when you're not trying to get through a high rate of review in 10 minutes, but as general tier 1, say, oh, tell me, explain your response. Why are you in the middle? Defend your choice there, something like that. You could have color-coded response cards where everybody's got a red, yellow, and green piece of paper, little square on their table, and they hold up different ones for different answers. Or maybe they have a set of 2 to agree, disagree, true, false, or 4 with the ABCDs. I teach my students, when I taught high school for 8 years, we all learned A, B, C, and D in sign language, just finger spelling, so that I could ask them really quick, what's the answer here for this multiple choice review that we're doing in our warm-up for this lesson? Individual whiteboards are fantastic because that gets you 100% of active participation for all of your students. You might pre-correct for what are the expectations for using individual whiteboards, so they're not frisbees thrown across the room. That's very dangerous. They're not hitting people on the heads and the neighbor. And you might give them time at the very first to say, okay, take 30 seconds to draw whatever you want, because they're going to need to get it out of their system. So giving them that opportunity and say, okay, now erase it, let's begin. And you've got your list of prompts that you're going to be giving for those 3 per minute for 10 minutes. Guided notes are great, where they fill in the blanks or answer questions as you go, or certain parts are ready for them to do versus things that you've done. And technology can be great. If you have the capability, there's clicker responses or apps, or you can buy sets of physical clickers that allow students to non-verbally all be engaged and respond. So here's an example. I might, with whiteboards, tell my whole class, okay, class, please solve for the product of 28 times 4. I wait a few seconds. Everybody's thinking about it, working it out on their whiteboard. They're getting ready to hold it up. They're keeping it close to their chest so neighbors aren't trying to cheat off them. I say, okay, hold up your whiteboards. What's the answer? And they all show me, and I can quickly scan the whole room and see that almost all of you found the correct answer was 112. Nice work. And depending on how many were incorrect, I make a note to myself to revisit something, maybe our 8 family of multiplication. And then I'm going to do a lot of that with choral responding where everybody's doing it, but occasionally I might drop in an individual question just to mix it up. But notice I don't say the name of the student first, because if I said, Stacy, solve for the product 30, what's everybody else going to do? They've already tuned out and they're not paying attention because it's not for them. But if I just say, this next one is for an individual, everyone solve for the product of 32 times 3. Give them 10 seconds, look at one, and then say, Stacy, what did you get? And then we can say agree, disagree, thumbs up, thumbs down. We could keep going from there. So that is a way to mix it up and intersperse some individual questioning, but keep a lot of choral responding going. Doing the whole group OTR lets me know how every student's doing as a group. I can make notes of what I need to revisit or do more of, which students need a little extra attention or some fine tuning of some understandings. They're getting really fast, they're getting fluent, they're memorizing things that we've learned but haven't maybe committed to memory. And then because of that memory is being intact, then they can free up that higher order thinking skills to think of more complex concepts and questions that I can ask later. So again, they're not getting off task because they're actively participating and therefore staying on task with us. And they can't tell me they're bored because like you can't be bored if you're doing it. So by definition, you're with me right now. So we're good to go. Let's keep going. Boom, 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 more questions. And they get immediate feedback. I can tell them when it's correct and we move on, or it's like, actually, the correct answer is Albany, New York. And then we move on. So we don't have to spend time harping on errors or anything. It's just 10 minutes to figure out how we're doing, quick reviews, see what's going on. But again, I want to, throughout my day, incorporate as much choral responding, think pair shares, whiteboards for everybody, thumbs up, thumbs down, all day. It's just part of good teaching to have that high rates of opportunities to respond. It's what I look for when I go out and do field supervision for teacher candidates who are studying at our university. I want to see they're using lots of behavior-specific praise, lots of opportunities to respond, versus what I often see is they're waiting around for a student to volunteer with an answer, and it always ends up being the same 1 or 2, 3 students giving the answer. No, we want to engage the whole class, keep everybody actively participating so they stay out of trouble. There's lots of research out there on the effectiveness of OTR. Eric Common, who's with us tonight, has done a literature review as well as worked with teachers in other states to support them in doing studies to investigate opportunities to respond. It works from our youngest kiddos at preschool all the way up to middle school and high school and across ability levels. So students with general education or students with other disabilities across from the low intensity disability categories to the high, not intensity, but low incidence and high incidence disability categories. We know it works, and there's lots of research to show that. If you want to read about them or learn more about them, each strategy's got this resource guide listing articles that are good for researchers to read, really intense with details, and there's some that are good for practitioners to read, and literature reviews that look at the whole set of studies that are out there and come to a generalized conclusion. By now, you should be getting the idea of all the benefits, how engaging it can be to help students review material, keep them on task. And it doesn't take a whole lot of preparation. You do need to make a list of questions. So that could be one of the challenges as well, is that it does take some prep time. So if I know I'm going to be doing a 10-minute review session and I want to do high rates, so 3 per minute, that means I need 30 questions ready to go for whatever it is that we're learning and reviewing. And maybe I do 5 minutes, so I don't need as much, but ready to go. You also need to be sure that you've taught the students and practiced with them so they know how to do it and what the expectation is for how you're going to present it and how they're expected to respond to it. So getting that ready to go, Being adjusted to that rapid pace could be challenging for some teachers who haven't done it before, but it just takes a little bit of practice. And you also have to be, have that with itness that Grant mentioned. We got to actively supervise everybody's responding so I can give correct feedback when they need it, whether it's an accurate response or needs some fine tuning. All right, let's look at these 8 steps for implementing opportunities to respond in your classroom. You can take this back and share it or do it yourself tomorrow. Step 1, you got to identify when you want to do this. So what's the lesson content that you're going to teach with this high rate, short period of time of review? Then step 2, prepare that list of questions, prompts, or cues. Determine step 3, how you're going to offer that. How are you going to deliver? Is it going to be on a whiteboard? Are you going to prepare a PowerPoint? Are you going to do it verbally? Do you have an overhead projector still that you use? How are you going to deliver it? And then how do you want the students to respond? Are you going to give them response cards or whiteboards or hand signals or choral responding or a mix of them all? So figure it out for that list of questions. Then step 5, explain to the students how this works, especially if it's your first time. You're going to want to practice before you get into the high rates. Do some sample questions and get them used to it, and explain the rationale for it, the review, the automaticity building, the fluency building. Then finally, step 6, conduct that lesson with the 3 opportunities to respond per minute for that short period of time, using lots of unison responding, occasionally throwing in that single student response. Respond as you go through the lesson to student answers, letting them know that they're correct, or fine-tuning any understandings with a quick correction, and being very encouraging and enthusiastic as you go, so they're excited about it as you are for the formative feedback that you're getting while you do it. And then finally, with all these strategies, we encourage you to offer students a chance to give feedback, that social validity component. We need to know what they're thinking about it, that they're enjoying it, liking it, or make some adjustments so that we keep doing the good strategy, but in a way that will work with them so they'll receive it well and do it. We offer this implementation checklist for success with those 8 steps, so you can keep track of whether you've done them or to what degree you've done them. We always recommend that you keep track of, are you implementing it as designed? That's the treatment integrity. Is it happening the way it's supposed to be happening? Social validity, what do people think about the goals, procedures, and outcomes? Not just the students, but the teacher or the classroom support aides that are helping out. And ideally, we'd want to do an experimental design so we know if changes that we see in student behavior is a result of this strategy or something else. So I might try it and withdraw it and then try it again each time for a few days and take some data to see how students are doing. You've got treatment integrity checklists where you can look across components for a week or across a day to see to what degree of integrity have I implemented the strategy. And we've got social validity surveys prepared pre and post intervention for both the student and the adult perspectives, allowing you to determine if the procedures, the goals, and the outcomes are meeting everybody's expectations. And then with each strategy, we offer a pre-made templated tier 2 intervention grid, but you can customize based on the resources and needs for your students. So it's defined, it's described, some suggested data-based entry criteria for who would benefit from this as an intensified and more targeted tier 2 strategy, as well as how to monitor the progress of the student with treatment integrity, social validity, and sometimes most importantly, that exit criteria. So that's an elementary example, and there's also a middle school, high school example. And these get customized. And this is so we can do RTR for the whole class, but you might also do it targeted for a particular student or a small group of students who have met these entry criteria with their school-wide data. So that's the PowerPoint. Just like all the other strategies, it follows the same structures and the same patterns. To close out our evening tonight, we're just going to take a look at a few other low-intensity strategies that are teacher-delivered that you might be interested in. So by doing that, guess where we're going to go? It's our favorite website, ci3t.org, on that professional learning tab. On the COVID tab, though, even though it's called COVID, that's where you would find this integrated lesson plan that Wendy talked about in the beginning. So as we've introduced these 3 low-intensity strategies to you, ideally, these happen amongst many lessons throughout the whole day, like we were saying, and they go so well together. The ones we talked about today, as well as others. I might pre-correct as we go into something where I'm doing active supervision, and part of that active supervision involves high rates of opportunities to respond, and I'm looking for opportunities to use behavior-specific praise when students are meeting expectations. I might even throw in some instructional choice in the beginning of that lesson. So these low-intensity strategies have opportunities throughout every lesson plan. With just a little forethought, they can be embedded in those. And we want to integrate academic, social, and behavioral. So I let my students know with a little pre-correction that in this lesson, you're going to need to remember that perspective taking that we looked at yesterday during our social skills lesson in the morning. So I'm using the same language for my social skills lessons. I'm reminding them of the behaviors that they're going to need to have to be successful in whatever academic skill we're about to learn or practice or do. So I'm integrating the domains with those low intensity strategies. And not that I would fill out a really thorough lesson plan for every single day, but here and there I would, and just to get me in the habit and the mindset of thinking about integrating those domains and using those low intensity strategies. So we looked at 3 today, but there's not only the 7 in that book with the toolkit on it, but there's even more listed on that professional learning tab and those accordions there, as well as more in that brown book that teachers always tell us that they enjoy as a book study. And as Eric mentioned and dropped the link in the chat for the open access journal articles, you can share those and get some very practical steps for using these strategies in the classroom and even at home. So check that out. And we would challenge you to think about, of these 7, what is one more? What's the next one that you would like to learn more about, to explore? Maybe even become an expert. Go get the article, go get the list of resources on the webpage for what's available to read and explore. Or if you have the book, read the chapter on it. And then you become the expert in your building on that strategy. You could even share it using the PowerPoint slides, just like we did tonight, downloaded from the website, at your next faculty and staff meeting, taking 10 minutes or less just to introduce them to the strategy or workshop it and give them a chance to practice real fast. Or discuss it at your PLC or grade level meetings, and just keep sharing and spreading the word and getting these strategies. We're trying to empower all of our educators to have these in their toolkit. So in their classroom, they know how to work with and support all students. So I don't feel like I need to kick the student out or send them to the office or call in somebody to help, because I've got the skills and strategies in my toolkit to support the student when I see that challenging behavior, or I see the agitation and the behavior is about to happen. I can prevent it by using these strategies. You might consider organizing a book study at your school and getting a list of on-site coaches who are experts or really good at these strategies, so people know who to go observe if they want to see it being done well, or who can I invite into my classroom to observe me and give me feedback based on who's self-identified as being really good at these strategies. So you might check those out and pick the next strategy that you want to do and learn more. We're so excited to have so many people here tonight. This was session 3 of 6. All of these are standalone sessions, so you can come to one, you can come to all. We did low intensity strategies tonight. Next time on January 9th, we're going to be doing tier 2. We're just going to look at tier 2 and everything about it, how to plan for it, how to have tier 2 intervention grids. And then we're going to model the procedures, even with looking at school-wide data to connect students truly through a data-informed process to supports. And we're going to look at behavior contracts and SRSD, self-regulated strategy development for writing, as 2 examples as we model all of the things about tier 2. Because within the CI3T model, we don't just go through that 1 year of training, which is the top half of this graphic. Very unique to the CI3T model is ongoing data-informed professional learning. So throughout the year, year after year, we continue in our CI3T schools to provide professional learning like tonight, to people who need it, to people who've had it before but need the refresher. With staff turnover, that's always a challenge, of course, and they benefit from just the continuous learning. And we hear all the time people say, why didn't I learn that? It's my first year, or things that we've shared or even taught year after year, but you're ready to hear it when you're ready to hear it, or it clicks when it's time to click. So the bottom one there, I think of as being one where we get a lot of feedback for just the basic classroom management strategies, where even our veteran experienced teachers say, those were great reminders for things that I've just need to do all the time. I do somewhat, but forget about, or it's become automated to where I need to do it with a little more intentionality. So check out that professional learning tab. And next time we'll talk about behavior contracts and SRSD for writing as examples to illustrate the tier 2 process and connecting students to supports. If you're interested, Grant Allen also runs and coordinates these CI3T trainers and coaches calls. And even though it says trainers and coaches and district leaders, but if you keep reading there on the top right, it says, and other individuals supporting the design and implementation of CI3T. So even if you don't have CI3T up and running, you can come and learn more about it, listen to other practitioners and implementers and get ideas, ask questions. It's a PowerPoint free zone in 1 hour where it's like open mic. People come and just talk and share ideas and support each other. So it's not just researchers looking into CI3T, but the schools who are implementing and doing CI3T, sharing their experience, knowledge, and expertise. So we hope you'll come back to the next Empower in January, and keep in mind that when you come to these, if you can't come to the next one, maybe you designate 2 people to come instead, or more, because this is open to all faculty and staff. All educators can come, but if you at least designate 2 to go to take notes and take what they learned and then bring it to your next faculty and staff meeting and share, or to the next grade level meetings or PLC meetings. That way it's getting distributed broadly. We know not everybody can make it to these and be here live with us, especially in time zones like Hawaii. That's really hard. It's only 11 a.m. there. And so it's very hard to be here live with us. So we thank you for those who are. And the good news is also, as you heard earlier in the beginning, these are recorded, so people can come back and visit the professional learning tab and look at Project Empower afterwards. So about 2 weeks later, we'll post the video for tonight. You can already go back and see the video from session 1 and 2. And if you scroll to the bottom of this page, then you'd be able to see the archive of videos from previous years as well. So there's always an opportunity to take the video, play it at a staff meeting, play it at a team meeting, or watch it individually, or assign it to new people as part of your onboarding process to get them up to speed on strategies and systems level thinking and things like that. So today we looked at the pre-correction active supervision opportunities to respond. And next time we'll look at behavior contracts and SRSD for writing as part of and the workings of that tier 2 process, using truly data-informed decision-making to connect students to additional supports. Thank you for being here. We're super excited, as always, to share this, and that these materials are freely available on ci3t.org for you to take and go use as you would, to teach others, to share, to customize and modify, to match your school theme and mascot and logo and everything. But we're so appreciative of that you took some time on a Thursday evening to come learn with us. And we're so grateful for that. And we hope that you will continue to come back and do more. Connect with us on social media. And if you would, on the right, there's a screenshot of a very, very brief session evaluation. We would love to get feedback from you. If you check your email, it should be there. And super brief, just to let us know how we did tonight. And there's the last couple of questions for any thoughts for future professional learning that you think could be beneficial in your context where you are. We do take those into consideration and review them as we plan for the years ahead. So we'll stick around if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, just thank you so much to the team for being here, and for all of you who made it on a Thursday night to learn and grow with us together.